So the line represents how much solute you can dissolve at that given temperature in 100 grams of water. So let's take a look at the X and the Y axis here. This is grams of solute, which each of these are the different solutes here, and it's per 100 grams of water. So if you imagine this, we have a little beaker here. In here, there's 100 grams of water, and that's about 100 milliliters of water, right? Because the density of water is 1. The reason they're using grams here is just in case, well, as you can see, the temperature changes, right? So as temperature changes, the volume would change a little bit. So to keep it all constant, they're using 100 grams of water in this, okay? The grams of solute here, well, if you take a look at, let's look at the sodium nitrate right here let's start it off at 0. So at 0 degrees Celsius, what this is saying is you have 100 grams of water, you could dissolve about 74 grams of sodium nitrate in that water. All of it would dissolve, it would disappear, okay? That's what basically dissolving is, right? So it looks like it's not gone, it's in there, but it would all dissolve. If you were to do the same thing, but try to put 80 grams in here, 80 grams of that sodium nitrate, what would happen is as you're pouring it in, you know, it would basically, some of it would sink to the bottom, right? And you'd be mixing and mixing and mixing, and some of it wouldn't dissolve. 6 grams of it would not dissolve because you could only dissolve 74 grams in there. Does that make sense? That's the whole idea of this, is, you know, basically if it's below the line and you're calculating, like if we put 40 grams of that sodium nitrate in there, it would all dissolve. Anything under the line would dissolve. Anything above, it would just dissolve up to the line, and then you'd have some precipitate at the bottom. It would just be some residue at the bottom that would not dissolve. Does that make sense? Okay. That's kind of the whole idea here. There's some terms with this. So for example, if you had exactly that 74 grams of sodium nitrate in here in 100 grams of water, and you couldn't add any more, that would be called saturated, all right? It's a saturated solution. If you added even like one little speck of it, one little crystal, it would sink right to the bottom and it would just stay at the bottom. It wouldn't dissolve. If you had less than this amount, then it would be unsaturated, all right? Because then you could still add more to it, all right? So those are some new terms, and that's kind of looking at the chart how it would work, all right? So over here it just says, if you had this amount in 100 grams of water, your solution would be called saturated, meaning it has the maximum amount of solute that would dissolve in that amount of water. If you had less than this amount, it could be called unsaturated, meaning you could dissolve more. Okay, and then across the bottom is temperature. What do you notice for sodium nitrate as the temperature increases? What happens to its solubility? It increases, yeah, exactly. So remember how a minute ago I said, all right, we had 80 we put in here, right? We put 80 grams in here, and there's some that's left at the bottom, right? At 0 degrees Celsius, it all wouldn't dissolve. What temperature would you need to get it up to so that it would all dissolve?
10.
Yeah, if you went up to 10, you can see here 10 degrees. Now it's at that point, then it would be saturated, right? And then it would start to dissolve in there, right? What if it cooled down again? What would happen if it cooled back down to maybe 5 or 4 degrees Celsius? What would happen to that solution? Because it all dissolved in there, right? So you wouldn't see any of it. It would just be floating around in there. But if you cooled it off, what could happen? It would come out of the solution. A crystal would grow at the bottom. You'd start seeing these little crystals down at the bottom, and they would come out of the solution. All right? And we'll do something like that in lab. We'll actually make a supersaturated solution, which is when you heat up the liquid. So maybe we heat it up to almost boiling, and then we dissolve it all in there. And then as it slowly goes back down, because room temperatures are a little bit, around 20. So as it cools off, what will happen is you'll have crystals starting to grow at the bottom, and they can look really cool if you do it properly in a controlled manner.